Picture this, it's the 1940s. You're trying to pass one of the biggest secrets in history. You can't slip a note under a park bench or use a coded radio transmission. Instead, you use half a Jell-O box, the show that looks at the intersection of crime and food history with a little dash of humor and a heavy dose of hold on a second. For bonus episodes, instead of looking at the foods that have made it and that are big and ubiquitous, we look at the foods that have maybe failed or fallen out of favor. Because who doesn't love a why though, you know? So here I am, a daydreamer at heart, daydreaming hard about strange foods, and I got to wondering, why did people make salads suspended in Jell-O? Because I have not had the distinct and questionable pleasure of consuming tuna suspended in gelée and topped with mayonnaise, and yet it was like a total vibe for a while. So grab your wobbles and let's dive into this history. It is going to make you wonder whether you could have survived the 50s. Let's start at the beginning. Before Jell-O was brightly colored and fruit flavored, gelatin wasn't dessert at all. It was chemistry, and we love a bit of science on this show. So if you've ever made chicken stock and left it in the refrigerator overnight, you've probably seen this kind of gelatin Jell-O magic happen. The liquid that was once warm and fluid transforms into wobbly jelly in the refrigerator. That's because as skin, bones, cartilage, and connective tissue simmer, they release collagen. As the broth cools, that collagen forms gelatin. BT dubs. Humans do love collagen. We also have it in our bodies. It's what keeps our joints flexible and our skin looking young. Okay, but related to broth. Humans figured out that this transformation from fluid to kind of wobbly thing thousands of years before anyone understood the science behind it. But since I love science, I'm gonna tell you anyway. Collagen is made up of 3 protein strands that you can envision a rope. They all come together and wind up as a rope. But when you heat it, these strands unwind and kind of just become noodles. So separate, long protein chains floating around. As it cools, those noodles turn back into ropes, but they stay in whatever shape they've kind of muddled into. They also capture water, and so that's what allows them to kind of wobble back and forth. Pretty cool if you ask me. This is also why Jell-O melts in your mouth, because our body temperature is hot enough to melt these coiled ropes of peptides into fluid. Ancient cooks noticed that this long simmered animal broth behaved differently once it's cooled, and therefore it was firm enough to slice and could preserve certain foods. So for centuries, gelatin wasn't really about convenience, which it wasn't because it took forever. It was something that you could mold into something cool. It took forever because you had to boil bones for hours, then strain out impurities. You had to make sure the liquid ideally wasn't cloudy so that when it did firm up, it wasn't kind of this like, oh, that's nice moment, but more of like, wow, it's clear and I can see what's suspended inside moment. So labor intensive, expensive, and usually only reserved for wealthy households. Because one thing that's always true in history is that time is money, friends. So by the Middle Ages, and especially in France, chefs had turned gelatin into an art form. These savory jellies, called aspics, which I do wonder if they could have come up with any other name, surrounded meats, fish, vegetables, eggs, even entire decorative displays for royal banquets. Banquets? I can't think of the word right now. That's okay. Suddenly, putting vegetables inside gelatin doesn't seem quite so random. It was like a whole vibe, a whole thing, a whole form of art. And then came the Industrial Revolution. In 1845, inventor Peter Cooper patented powdered gelatin. So now you could take the powder, mix it with hot water, let it cool, and you'd get Jell-O. It wasn't an instant success, though. It was just a solution to a big problem. People no longer had to spend an entire day boiling bones just to make gelatin. Half a century later, carpenter turned cough syrup maker Pearl White and his wife May mixed powdered gelatin with sugar and fruit flavoring. May knew how to make things taste better, and that's how her involvement really helped Jell-O become what it is today, because they were also the ones who called it Jell-O. But sales for Jell-O weren't great, and they actually sold the business for $450, which in today's money is $11,000, which in hindsight kind of feels like the moment people sold their Apple stock in 1982 because they didn't think that computers were going anywhere. We can all relate to that fear. It sucks. So the new owner, though, orator Francis Woodward, had a different idea. He was like, screw gelatin. We're going to tell them this is a possibility and we're going to market it like that. So he sends recipe booklets to households across America. Because remember, marketing levers at the time were like less than we have now. So he was like, show them how to do it, get it in their hands. Then salespeople, give them samples, which I kind of imagine is like a person, he's got a horse or a mule pulling a cart, and it's got all these little wobbly things on it, and he's just like handing them out, trying to make sure they don't melt in the sun. I don't know. Magazine ads also showed shimmering, molded creations that looked elegant, modern, and surprisingly easy to make. So now instead of spending all day making aspic, now you could tear open a packet, add some hot water, and have something that looked almost magical in minutes. By the early 1900s, Jell-O had become a household name, which is bananas to me because we are talking long enough ago, like Downton Abbey making Jell-O molds, and I don't remember that happening in any episodes. If you think of one, email me at truecrimeculinary@gmail.com. So then came another invention that helped launch Jell-O into the stratosphere. What is it? The refrigerator. As electric refrigerators spread through American homes during the 1930s and 40s, and especially post-war years, molded foods became incredibly practical. You could make them the night before. They'd stay cold. They looked impressive, and they were relatively inexpensive. They called them Jell-O salads, which I am curious how salad made it into that word. But the goal was to perfectly suspend fruit, vegetables, and proteins, even marshmallows, inside crystal clear gelatin, so that every slice revealed a perfect cross-section. It was kind of like edible stained glass. Now, this description made me think of the fact that actually I have been in contact with this type of thing since I was a little kid. I am German. Fam is German. Fam is also Spanish. But the German ones are the ones that are relevant to this story. Every summer that I spent in Germany, I had the opportunity to go to a grocery store, which I have to say in Germany, they're epic because Germans love them some cold cuts. And one of the things that I have seen many a time, and I even think the last time I was in Germany, I went with my cousin to buy some of this because I was like, what is this? And it is, now I realize it's aspic, and it has like little chunks of meat, veg, and all kinds of stuff like flavorings. And the idea is that you buy it sliced and you put it on your morning roll, your Brötchen or your bread. And it wasn't until I made this episode that I connected the dots of like, oh, that's how it would have looked, or like why someone would eat it. Not one of my top choices, but definitely an experience. So back to the US of A. The timing could not have been better because America had survived the Great Depression in the 1930s. World War II was over and people are exhausted, on edge, but hopeful. People had been working really hard and been super bummed. And now they're being told they can lean into convenience, and they're giving tools to do it because manufacturers were like, hey, hold my newly convenienced food. Let us bring on frozen dinners, cake mixes, canned soups, instant puddings, and of course, today's star, Jell-O. Today, we sometimes hear processed food and think like shortcuts and gross. But then at the time, processed food often meant progress because science had made life easier for people. And if your grandmother proudly served a molded salad in 1955, she wasn't old-fashioned at the time. She was a modern woman. Which brings us to the question everyone is waiting for. Why was there mayonnaise? Now, as a proud dipper of fries in mayonnaise, because again, see above German, the idea of mixing mayonnaise with pudding makes the spit in my mouth go a little funny, like it does right before my stomach engages in a projectile experience. But if you've ever looked through a vintage cookbook, you've probably seen recipes that feel questionable, such as lime gelatin, cottage cheese, pineapple, celery, olives, shrimp, and tuna, all in one. Then a generous dollop of mayonnaise, and they call it a salad. But here's the thing, people in the 1950s weren't thinking of Jell-O the way they do now. It wasn't a dessert. To them, it was kind of like this centuries-old way of serving food. And mayonnaise wasn't being treated like frosting. It was being treated like salad dressing, like kind of a ranch vibe. So many molded salads were meant to be served alongside dinner, not after it. And lime, at the time, was considered bright and refreshing, rather than what I would argue radioactive and candyish. So as lime gelatin salad with celery and mayonnaise wasn't as strange to them as it sounds to us, now church cookbooks were filled with family favorites, holiday tables featured cranberry molds, Bridge clubs served colorful rings of gelatin. Potlucks were not complete without at least one person carrying a suspiciously wobbly dish covered in plastic wrap. Some recipes have aged surprisingly well. Others, such as the one called the Tuna Ring Supreme, I would have to vehemently say, no thank you. Or another one, a shrimp mold. A cabbage suspended in lemon gelatin, which sounds like it's a treat in the moment and later. One recipe combined olives, onion, vinegar, celery, lemon gelatin. I am feeling the uncomfortable. So, what happened? Well, by the 1970s and 80s, American taste had started to change. Fresh produce became easier to find year-round, so you didn't even need to zhuzh up a can of peaches. Restaurant menus also reflected this shift towards fresher ingredients. So convenience foods stopped feeling futuristic and kind of started feeling processed. The same recipes that once impressed dinner guests suddenly reminded younger generations of kind of like grandparents' vibes. So why did Jell-O remain? Well, because kids love it, and I would argue college students. I did look up when Jell-O shots came onto the scene, and it is the 1970s. If you really want to go looking for some of this intensely inventive food, you can go to some church potlucks, is kind of the vibe I got, maybe some Midwestern family reunions, or there are actually groups who love honoring the 1950s and 60s, and apparently that is your bullseye for finding some of these delicatessens. And I felt like bonus episodes will not be complete unless I can find reviews of whatever we're talking about. So I went to Reddit because if anyone has opinions about these recipes, it's going to be Redditors. And they did not disappoint. I'm going to read you my top 4. Numero uno from Airplayed. They were as gross as they looked. The pineapple fruit were okay, but the ones with peas and carrots were very much like organized vomit. Number 2 from Cat from Jersey. My family's Thanksgiving tradition is lemon lime Jell-O mold with grated carrots and crushed pineapple. It's kind of a joke, but everyone loves it. It's very refreshing. My grandmother made it back in the day, then eventually passed the mold on to my mom, and when she passed, I took over the tradition. What I love about that one is that she's just kind of owning it. Sounds totally gross to me, but I love that she's owning it, and I support that. Number 3, slightly sane mom of 5. My grandma made a Jell-O salad in the 60s and early 70s. Lime Jell-O, grated carrots, grated cabbage, celery, and chunks of canned corned beef. It was always served first. I refused to eat it and was told if I didn't eat this green abomination, I wasn't allowed the rest of the meal. I cannot tell you how many meals I missed for years because I refused to eat the Jell-O salad. I cannot eat Jell-O or I get flashbacks. And yeah, no, that sounds pretty rough. I saved my favorite for last, just from Wolf Thick. One simple sentence. We used to call that Grinch poo. Now, there were a ton of mixed feelings reflected in all of the comments in Reddit, which I think kind of also embody a lot of what we talked about. The social pressure to do this kind of weird stuff, to kind of be modern, show you're using your refrigerator, be the perfect chef, or home cook or mom or whatever. And then also kind of being like, this is gross, or I don't like it, not my favorite. So how did this food overlap with our spies in the 40s? Remember that Jell-O box from the beginning? In the late 1940s, the United States believed someone was leaking atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. Investigators accused Julius and Ethel Rosenberg of helping run a Soviet spy network. And according to testimony at trial, the Rosenbergs arranged a meeting between Harry Gold and a chemist acting as a courier, and David Greenglass, Ethel's brother, who had worked on the top secret Manhattan Project, which was the program that developed the first atomic bomb. So to make sure each man knew he had found the right person, they gave each person half of a Jell-O carton they had torn in half. And so when they met, they had to combine the pieces. And if they matched perfectly, they knew they were talking to the right person. I have to say it's kind of genius. There seems to be a lot of room for error, but still a very kind of creative way of using this. In the trial, the original carton was never recovered, but a replica was later shown. Greenglass testified against his sister and brother-in-law. Gold received a prison sentence, and in 1953, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg takes a turn, were executed after being convicted of conspiracy to commit espionage. Decades later, historians still debate many aspects of the case, aspects, but one thing has never changed. Somewhere in the middle of one of the Cold War's most famous spy stories is a box of Jell-O. History isn't the only thing that gets suspended in gelatin. Apparently, so are atomic secrets and tuna. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.